worth and that sort of thing. You just said, and I want to make sure I got this. There are 16 schools, and if I'm not mistaken, 150,000 people,
Right.
and you have to manage and navigate so many of those different relationships where you work. And so, and I know that's not all in your space, but it's just like the implications of what you do is vast and huge. How do you go to your employer and say, "Hey, I'm valuable"? And so the question is, how does a person negotiate salary or the value of their services in your job?
Hmm. I think three things. I think it's important to know yourself and have self-awareness, knowing what you bring to the table, knowing how you contribute, how you've leveled up, et cetera, et cetera. Two, you have to know what the policies are at your job. So sometimes I just browse our website and look at the policies, and we have policies on increases and raises. The
Okay.
state rule is that you can't give someone more than a 15% raise without a major justification. And you can get raises for someone getting an outside job offer, someone saying, "Hey, I'm going to leave, I'm taking this other job." Then you can get a 15% raise. Or they can get a raise at some colleges based on education. But there are rules for state employees on when and how you get raises. So understanding one, knowing what you offer and who you are. Two, knowing what the rules are. But I also would say three would be at the beginning of a job. That's your most powerful time to have control over your salary. Once you get the job, you have significantly less control over what you make and how much you're going to make. So when you're in those phases, and I haven't always done this, but when you're in those beginning phases, you want to say, "Can you tell me how you came to this salary?" Because they may use a formula, because they're trying to be fair and equitable. They may use a formula that says this many years of education, this much experience. We want them also. So you might want to understand what they use to come up with that salary. And then you want to say, "I also didn't tell you that I have years of experience with this, and I also add this, and I have this degree." So that can add to your formula to boost you up.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's also good to leave. If you're in a place that doesn't value you, sometimes you might have to go. And you leaving will either say, "No, don't go," or they'll say, "See you later." So you have to have a plan to, that when you value yourself and how much you make, a plan to, when you leave. So I think you have to just know yourself and be aware, but also be aware of what the policies and restrictions are. You may want to jump into a different pay band or pay scale. And I know this might sound like higher lingo to younger folk, but you want to read a book on negotiating or an article on it. And when it comes time to accept a job, when I got my first job, it was like, woo, I got a job and I'm working for the state. And, I took my $35,000 without asking any questions. It was like, thank you. But many times you want to be at a minimum, you want to try to be at that midpoint. If there's a salary range, you want to try to get the midpoint, because many times jobs can hire you at the midpoint without any justification. Sometimes if they go over the midpoint, they might have to write up that justification. But there's so many rules that you want to see what the rules are, Google stuff, look on state websites. But again, know who you are, know what your worth is, know what the policies and restrictions are, and do your best to get the highest salary that you can at the beginning of a job.
That was masterclass. Important. That sadly, I mean, I can't recall a time where I got that type of instruction, high school, college, where like there are places where, it's talked about, but not nearly enough. I think we have to have more of that cultural, specifically in communities of color, that conversation, because, if you're just happy to be in the door and you don't know what's available, you would never ask that question. And so very important. Thanks for sharing. Um,